Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the massive alien fleet materialize through hyperspace jumps. 67 ships, each one larger than Earth's most powerful dreadnought, arranged themselves in perfect formation around the Sol system. The bridge crew worked in tense silence, their faces illuminated by the red glow of combat alerts. "Ma'am, we're receiving a transmission on all frequencies," reported Lieutenant Martinez from the communications station. His voice carried the weight of humanity's first contact with an alien civilization, though the circumstances were far from diplomatic. Sarah nodded grimly. 3 days ago, these same ships had appeared at the Proxima Centauri colony and delivered an ultimatum. The colonists had 24 hours to surrender or face complete annihilation. When the deadline passed, the aliens had glassed the entire planet from orbit. 2 million humans, including Sarah's younger brother Marcus, had died in the bombardment. The main view screen flickered to life, revealing the imposing figure of General Thaxakar of the Hegemony Empire. His reptilian features were angular and predatory, with scales that shifted between deep purple and black depending on the light. 4 arms moved with calculated precision, each ending in clawed hands that could crush a human skull without effort. Behind him, Sarah could see other members of his species operating advanced technology that made Earth's finest equipment look primitive. "Primitive species of the third planet," General Thaxkar's voice boomed through the bridge. Translated by systems that seemed to understand human language better than humans understood it themselves. "I am General Thaxkar, commander of the 47th Subjugation Fleet of the Hegemony Empire. Your pathetic resistance at your outer colonies has been noted and punished accordingly." Sarah felt her jaw clench as images of burning cities flashed on auxiliary screens. The aliens weren't just showing them Proxima Centauri. They had recordings of attacks on other human settlements across known space. The Kepler colony, New Marseille, Armstrong Base, all of them reduced to smoking craters. "Your species has exactly 72 of your planetary rotations to submit completely to hegemony rule," the general continued, his secondary arms manipulating controls that brought up holographic displays of Earth's major population centers. "You will disarm your military forces, surrender your government leaders, and prepare your population for processing into our labor force. Resistance will result in the complete sterilization of your homeworld." Captain Rodriguez, Sarah's second-in-command, whispered urgently beside her. "Admiral, our long-range scanners show at least 12 more fleets moving toward human space. This isn't just about Earth. They're planning to wipe out every human settlement in the galaxy." Sarah studied the tactical display showing the alien formation. The ships moved with perfect coordination, their hulls gleaming with energy shields that could deflect anything in Earth's current arsenal. Intelligence reports suggested each vessel carried enough firepower to crack a continent. The math was simple and terrifying. Humanity's combined fleet of 300 ships against an enemy force that numbered in the thousands. "General Thaxkar," Sarah activated the return transmission, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Space Command. I'm authorized to speak for all of humanity." The alien general's eyes narrowed, and his scales shifted to a darker hue that their xenobiologists had identified as a sign of amusement or contempt. "Speak quickly, Primitive. Your compliance is not optional, merely a courtesy we extend before inevitable conquest." Sarah took a breath that carried the weight of her species' future. Around her, the bridge crew watched with expressions mixing fear and determination. These were the men and women who had volunteered to stand between Earth and annihilation, knowing full well they were outgunned and outnumbered. "We've reviewed your terms, General," Sarah said, her words carefully chosen, "and humanity has prepared a counter-proposal for your consideration." A sound that might have been laughter emerged from the general's translator. "Counter-proposal? Your primitive technology cannot threaten our vessels. Your scattered forces cannot match our coordination. Your brief existence as a spacefaring species grants you no understanding of galactic warfare. What possible terms could you offer that would interest the hegemony empire? The tension on the bridge was palpable as crew members exchanged glances. They knew what was coming. The plan they had developed wasn't based on superior technology or numerical advantage. It was based on something the aliens clearly didn't understand about humanity: the absolute refusal to kneel. "Our counterproposal is simple, General Thaxkar," Sarah said, her voice growing harder with each word. "You have 72 hours to withdraw your forces from human space and return to whatever hole you crawled out of. After that deadline, we consider your presence an act of war, and we will respond accordingly." The silence that followed stretched across light years. On the alien command ship, General Thaxkar's 4 arms went completely still. His scales shifted rapidly through several color patterns that suggested confusion and growing anger. Behind him, other aliens could be seen turning from their stations to stare at the transmission. "You dare issue demands to the hegemony empire?" The general's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Your entire species could be extinct within a single rotation of your planet. Our weapons could boil your oceans and crack your continents. Our forces have conquered star systems spanning half the galaxy. What madness possesses you to believe you can threaten us?" Captain Rodriguez leaned forward, his own anger finally showing. "Maybe it's the same madness that made us leave our planet in the first place. The same madness that made us cross impossible distances to reach other stars. The same madness that makes us fight when any sane species would run." Sarah held up a hand to silence her second-in-command, though she appreciated the sentiment. "General, you've clearly done your research on human technology and military capabilities, but there's something about our species that your intelligence gathering seems to have missed." She activated a series of displays showing historical footage from Earth's past. Images of humans fighting impossible odds appeared on the transmission: Spartans at Thermopylae, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, the Alamo, Stalingrad, the Battle of Britain. Each image showed humans choosing to fight rather than surrender, even when victory seemed impossible. "We're the species that looked at animals 10 times our size and decided they would make good pets. We're the ones who saw an ocean and decided to cross it on floating wood. We looked at the sky and decided we belonged there too. When every predator on our planet was faster, stronger, and deadlier than us, we didn't adapt by becoming stronger. We adapted by becoming stubborn." General Thaxkar's scales had shifted to a pattern their xenobiologists couldn't yet interpret, but his posture suggested growing uncertainty. "Your primitive history means nothing against modern warfare. Emotion cannot deflect energy weapons or penetrate battle shields." "You're absolutely right," Sarah agreed. "But here's the thing about humans, General. We don't just get emotional. We get creative. And creativity paired with stubbornness has a way of producing very unpleasant surprises for anyone who underestimates us." She nodded to Lieutenant Martinez, who began transmitting a new series of data packets. "We're sending you detailed specifications for humanity's current military capabilities. Not our propaganda numbers or our wishful thinking, the actual verified performance characteristics of our ships, weapons, and defensive systems. The transmission included everything: shield efficiency ratings, weapon penetration capabilities, fleet coordination protocols, even the psychological profiles of human military leaders. It was the kind of complete intelligence package that should have made any enemy commander confident in their victory. As you can see, Sarah continued, you're absolutely correct about our technological disadvantage. Your ships are faster, stronger, and better armed than anything we can field. Your numbers are overwhelming. Your tactical coordination is superior. By every conventional measure, this shouldn't even be considered a fair fight. General Thaxkar studied the incoming data. his expression growing more confused with each passing moment. Then why do you persist in this foolishness? Your own intelligence confirms your inevitable defeat. Sarah smiled, and there was something in that expression that made several bridge crew members take an unconscious step backward. It wasn't the smile of someone facing death. It was the smile of someone who knew something their enemy didn't. Because, General Thaxkar, you're operating under a fundamental misunderstanding about how humans approach warfare. You assume that superior technology and numerical advantage guarantee victory. You assume that rational analysis of military capabilities determines the outcome of conflicts. You assume that any intelligent species, when faced with impossible odds, will choose surrender over annihilation. She gestured toward the tactical display showing the alien fleet formation. Those assumptions might work for every other species you've encountered, but humans didn't become the dominant species on their planet by being rational. We became dominant by being unpredictable, adaptable, and absolutely, completely unreasonable when cornered. The general's translator struggled with several concepts in Sarah's statement, producing odd pauses and inflections that suggested the alien technology had difficulty processing certain human ideas. You speak of unreasonableness as if it were an advantage. Logic dictates that inferior forces cannot defeat superior ones. Logic also dictated that humans couldn't fly, couldn't survive in space, and couldn't split the atom, Sarah replied. We've spent our entire evolutionary history proving logic wrong, and now you're about to discover what happens when a species that specializes in impossible things decides you need to leave. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge of the Defiance in tense silence. Outside the viewports, the alien fleet maintained its perfect formation, weapons charged and shields raised. But for the first time since they had arrived, the ships seemed somehow less imposing, not because they were any less dangerous, but because humanity had just served notice that danger worked both ways. Captain Rodriguez moved closer to Sarah's command chair. Admiral, the fleet is standing by for your orders. All ships report ready for immediate deployment. Sarah nodded. Her attention focused on the tactical displays showing human forces throughout the solar system. 300 ships against 67. Primitive technology against advanced weapons. A species barely 2 centuries into space travel against an empire that had conquered half the galaxy. The odds were impossible. The chances of victory were essentially zero. Any rational analysis suggested immediate surrender was the only logical choice, which was exactly why General Thaxkar and his hegemony empire were about to learn that humans had never been particularly interested in being logical. The first 24 hours of humanity's ultimatum passed in deceptive calm. General Thaxkar had positioned his fleet in what their military doctrine called the dominance formation, a configuration designed to demonstrate overwhelming superiority while maintaining optimal firing solutions on critical planetary targets. The hegemony had used this same formation to cow hundreds of species into immediate submission. None had ever failed to surrender within the first day. On the bridge of his flagship, the inevitable conquest, General Thaxkar studied the tactical displays with growing unease. The human ships had not withdrawn to a defensive position around their homeworld as expected. Instead, they had dispersed throughout the solar system in small groups, apparently ignoring every principle of sound military strategy. Even more puzzling, several human vessels had actually moved closer to his formation rather than seeking the safety of distance. "General," reported Subcommander Veltar from the sensor station, her scales displaying the deep blue patterns of confusion. "Human military transmissions have increased by 300% since their ultimatum. They appear to be coordinating some form of system-wide activity." Thaxkar's secondary arms manipulated the control interface, bringing up intercepts of human communications. The transmissions were encrypted, but hegemony code-breaking systems had little difficulty with such primitive security measures. What they revealed made no tactical sense. Human ships were not preparing defensive positions or evacuation routes. Instead, they were engaging in what appeared to be highly dangerous modifications to their vessels. Ships designed for exploration were being hastily retrofitted with military-grade reactors. Cargo vessels were having their holds filled with what appeared to be improvised explosive devices. Most disturbing of all, several human ships had actually begun dismantling their own safety systems. "Sub-Commander," Thaxcar said, his voice carrying the weight of growing concern, "have our analysts determined the purpose of these human modifications?" Veltar consulted her displays, her expression becoming increasingly troubled. "General, our best assessment is that the humans are converting their entire civilian fleet into kamikaze vessels. They appear to be removing life support systems, navigation safeguards, and structural integrity monitors. Some ships are registering reactor signatures consistent with deliberate overload preparation." The general's scales shifted to the deep purple that indicated serious contemplation. In all his campaigns across 40 star systems, he had never encountered a species willing to sacrifice their civilian population in warfare. The humans weren't just preparing to fight, they were preparing to die in the most destructive manner possible. "General Thaxcar," the communication system activated, carrying the voice of Admiral Chen from the human command vessel. "This is your 48-hour reminder. You now have 24 hours remaining to withdraw from human space." Thaxcar activated the return transmission, his tone carrying the authority of the Hegemony Empire. "Admiral Chen, our sensors indicate your forces are engaging in modifications that will result in the destruction of your own vessels. Surely even your species cannot be so irrational as to choose mutual annihilation over the prosperity of Hegemony membership." The human admiral's response carried an odd mixture of amusement and steel. "General, you seem to be operating under the assumption that we consider death worse than slavery. That's mistake number one. Mistake number two is thinking that we're planning mutual annihilation." Before Thaxcar could respond, his tactical officer's alarmed voice cut across the bridge. "General, new contacts entering the system. Multiple hyperspace signatures detected." The main display shifted to show the outer system, where dozens of new ships were materializing from hyperspace jumps. But these weren't hegemony reinforcements. The newcomers were broadcasting human identification codes, and their designs were unlike anything in his intelligence files. "Admiral Chen," Thaxcar demanded, "what are these vessels? Our intelligence indicated your species possessed only 300 ships total." "Well, General, that's the thing about intelligence." Sarah's voice carried a tone that suggested she was enjoying herself. "It's only as good as the questions you ask. You cataloged our military fleet. You counted our exploration vessels. You even tracked our commercial shipping. But you never asked about our industrial capacity." The new arrivals were massive, their hulls bearing the scars of hasty construction. They weren't built for elegance or efficiency. They were built for pure destructive potential. Each ship was essentially a massive engine strapped to the largest warhead humanity could manufacture. "These ships were built in the last 72 hours, General. Constructed in orbital shipyards, asteroid mining facilities, and even retrofitted space stations. Every human with engineering experience has been working around the clock to build as many of these as possible. We call them spite ships. They exist for exactly one purpose." Sub-Commander Veltar was frantically updating the tactical display as more ships continued arriving. "General, I count over 800 new vessels, and more are still materializing. The construction rate they're achieving should be impossible with their technology level." Thaxcar found himself in the unusual position of having to recalculate force ratios in the middle of a confrontation. His 67 ships still possessed overwhelming individual superiority, but the humans had just increased their numbers by a factor of 3 in less than 3 days. "Admiral Chen, even if your construction capabilities exceed our projections, these hastily built vessels cannot match the combat effectiveness of hegemony warships. You are merely providing us with more targets to destroy. You're absolutely right about that, General. Each one of these ships would lose in a direct confrontation with one of yours. They're slower, less maneuverable, and their weapons can't penetrate your shields. But here's the thing about spite ships. They're not designed to win fights. They're designed to take you with them when they die. The transmission included technical specifications for the new vessels, and what Thaxikar saw made his scales shift to patterns of alarm. Each ship carried a reactor deliberately designed for catastrophic overload. The warheads weren't conventional explosives, but compressed matter bombs that would create localized gravitational anomalies. Most disturbing of all, the ship's navigation systems were programmed for ramming attacks that would continue even if the crew was killed. "You have built suicide vessels," Thaxikar observed, his voice carrying a mixture of horror and fascination. "Your species is willing to sacrifice over 800 ships and their crews to inflict damage on our forces." "Oh, General," Admiral Chen's laughter was genuinely amused. "You're still not thinking like a human. Those ships don't have crews." The statement hung in space for a moment before its implications became clear. Every spite ship was operating under complete automation. The humans had built hundreds of unmanned vessels whose only purpose was to ram into hegemony ships and explode. They had industrialized kamikaze attacks. "Furthermore," Chen continued, "our shipyards are still operating. We're launching approximately 50 new spite ships every 6 hours. By the time your ultimatum expires, we expect to have over 1,500 of them. And General, we can keep building them faster than you can destroy them." Thaxikar stared at the tactical display showing human ships spreading throughout the system like a virus. Traditional military doctrine had no provisions for enemies who could replace their losses faster than they could be inflicted. The humans weren't just ignoring the rules of warfare, they were rewriting them entirely. "Sub-Commander Veltar, contact Hegemony Command. Request immediate reinforcement of at least 2 additional fleets. This situation has developed beyond our initial parameters." "General," Veltar's response carried troubling news. "Long-range communications are being disrupted by human jamming systems. Additionally, our scouts report that humans are constructing similar defensive measures around every star system they occupy. Request for reinforcements may not reach command for several days." The situation was rapidly becoming unprecedented in hegemony history. Not only were the humans refusing to surrender, they were actively preventing Thaxikar from calling for help while simultaneously building an armada of suicide ships. It was insane, irrational, and completely outside every principle of civilized warfare. "Admiral Chen," Thaxikar activated the communication system again. "Your tactics violate every convention of honorable combat. Suicide attacks and automated warfare represent the depths of primitive savagery. General, let me tell you something about human warfare." Chen's response carried a hardness that made several alien bridge crew members step back from their stations. "We don't fight honorable wars. We fight wars we intend to win. And if that means building 1,000 ships designed to explode in your face, then we'll build 2,000. If it means violating your conventions, then we'll violate them so thoroughly that you'll need new words to describe what we've done to your rule book." The transmission paused as automated systems on both sides processed trajectory calculations. The human spite ships weren't moving to engage yet, but their positions were clearly chosen for maximum strategic impact. They were spread throughout the system in a pattern that would make it impossible for hegemony forces to retreat without running a gauntlet of suicide attacks. "You have 16 hours remaining to withdraw, General Thaxikar," Admiral Chen announced. "After that deadline, every human ship in this system has orders to ram the nearest alien vessel at maximum velocity. We estimate that even if you destroy 90% of our ships before impact, the remaining 10% will be sufficient to eliminate your entire fleet." Thaxikar performed rapid calculations on his command systems. The mathematics were grimly straightforward. His ships could indeed destroy the majority of human vessels before impact, but sheer numbers meant that dozens of spite ships would reach their targets. Each successful ramming attack would likely destroy or cripple a hegemony vessel. At best, he might eliminate the human fleet while losing half his own forces. At worst, mutual annihilation was the most likely outcome. "Your species chooses death over submission," Thaxkar observed. "This is not rational behavior for any intelligent life form." "No, General, this is specifically human behavior," Chen replied. "We're the species that looked at nuclear weapons and decided to build enough to destroy our own planet 20 times over. We're the ones who went to war with ourselves for 6,000 years before we figured out peace. We've spent our entire history choosing the hard way over the easy way and the dangerous way over the safe way." She paused, letting the implications sink in before continuing. "You want to know what's rational, General? Rational is understanding that some things are worse than death. Rational is recognizing that a species willing to die fighting will eventually learn to win fighting. Rational is realizing that the humans you're talking to right now are the descendants of every human who refused to surrender when things looked hopeless." The bridge of the inevitable conquest had fallen into unusual silence as the alien crew contemplated the implications of human psychology. They were facing a species that didn't just refuse to follow the rules. They seemed constitutionally incapable of accepting defeat under any circumstances. 16 hours, General." Admiral Chen's final transmission carried the weight of absolute certainty. "Use them wisely." The communication ended, leaving General Thaxkar staring at tactical displays showing hundreds of human ships spreading throughout his formation like hunting wolves. For the first time in his military career, he was facing an enemy that considered victory and suicide equivalent options. The hegemony empire had conquered half the galaxy using superior technology and overwhelming force. They had never encountered a species that responded to overwhelming force by becoming more dangerous rather than more compliant. General Thaxkar was beginning to suspect that humanity represented something entirely new in galactic warfare, a species that became more formidable when cornered, more creative under pressure, and more united when threatened with extinction. The countdown continued, and with each passing hour, more human ships materialized throughout the system. With 2 hours remaining until humanity's deadline, General Thaxkar made a decision that would echo through galactic history. Rather than wait for the inevitable clash, he opened a private communication channel to Admiral Chen, not as the representative of the hegemony empire demanding submission, but as a military commander seeking to understand an enemy unlike any he had ever encountered. "Admiral Chen," his voice carried none of its previous authority, "I request a brief conference before hostilities commence. As a fellow military leader, surely you can appreciate the value of understanding one's opponent." The response came within minutes, and Admiral Chen's image appeared on his private screen. Behind her, the bridge of the human command ship showed signs of intense activity, but her demeanor remained calm and focused. "General Thaxkar, I'm willing to talk, but I should warn you. My people don't negotiate once we've set a deadline. That countdown represents something sacred to humans, our word given freely. We don't break promises, especially promises about when we intend to start fighting." Thaxkar studied the human admiral with new attention. Her species was physically unremarkable by galactic standards. No natural armor, no enhanced strength, no specialized sensory organs. Yet something in her eyes suggested a depth of resolve that his military training had never prepared him to evaluate. "Admiral, in my 3 decades of military service, I have overseen the conquest of 47 star systems. Every species eventually recognizes the futility of resistance against overwhelming force. Your tactical situation is hopeless by any rational analysis. Why do your people choose destruction over the prosperity of Imperial membership?" Admiral Chen leaned back in her command chair, and for a moment her expression softened slightly. "General, Let me ask you something. In all those conquests, how many species fought back after you demonstrated your overwhelming superiority? Initial resistance is common, but it typically ceases once we eliminate their primary military forces. Most species recognize the logic of submission within days of our arrival. That's because most species are logical, Chen replied. They weigh costs against benefits, analyze their chances of survival, and make rational decisions based on available data. Humans do all of that too, General. The difference is what we do with that analysis once we complete it. She gestured toward a display showing human ships continuing their seemingly suicidal preparations throughout the system. Every person in this fleet knows exactly what our chances are. We've run the numbers. We've analyzed your technology. We understand that we're probably going to die in the next 2 hours. But here's the thing about humans. Knowing something is impossible just makes us more interested in doing it. Thaxkar's scales shifted to patterns his crew had never seen before, combinations of confusion, respect, and something that might have been fear. But why? What possible benefit justifies certain annihilation? Even if you damage my fleet, the Empire will send others. Your defiance serves no logical purpose. You're thinking about this all wrong. General, Admiral Chen said, and her voice carried the weight of absolute conviction. You see defiance as pointless because you're measuring success by survival rates and territorial control. But humans measure success differently. The display behind her shifted to show historical footage from Earth, humans throughout history choosing death over submission. Warriors facing impossible odds, civilians resisting occupation, scientists pursuing knowledge that might kill them. Each image showed humans refusing to accept limitations imposed by others. We don't fight to win, General Thaxkar. We fight to remain free. And freedom isn't something you can lose by dying. You can only lose it by giving up. Every human ship that rams one of yours won't be dying in defeat. They'll be dying as free humans who never knelt to an alien empire. The general's tactical displays chimed softly, indicating 1 hour remaining until the human deadline. Throughout the system, spite ships had begun moving into final attack positions. Their movements were precise and coordinated despite being automated, another example of human unpredictability that defied conventional military analysis. Admiral, even if your philosophical position is admirable, the practical result remains unchanged. Your species faces extinction whether you resist or surrender. The Empire's response to defiance is total annihilation of rebellious populations. Admiral Chen's smile was sharp enough to cut starlight. And that, General, is your Empire's second critical mistake. The first was assuming we'd surrender when threatened. The second is assuming that extinction scares us more than slavery. She activated a new display showing transmission logs from human settlements across the galaxy. Every human colony received recordings of your ultimatum and our response. Right now, in 17 star systems, humans are building their own spite ships. They're evacuating civilians to hidden locations and preparing for your arrival. Your empire isn't facing 300 human ships, General. You're facing the entire human species, and we've just taught them how to build ships designed specifically to kill your vessels. Thaxkar stared at the data streams showing increased activity throughout human space. What he had assumed was an isolated confrontation was apparently part of a species-wide preparation for total war. The humans weren't just refusing to surrender. They were mobilizing their entire civilization for asymmetric warfare. Moreover, Chen continued, we've broadcast complete technical specifications for spite ship construction to every human settlement, along with detailed analysis of your ship's capabilities, tactical formations, and vulnerabilities that we've observed over the past 3 days. Even if you destroy every human in this system, the survivors will know exactly how to hurt you. The implications struck Thaxkar like a physical blow. The humans hadn't just refused submission. They had transformed his demonstration of superiority into a galaxy-wide intelligence-gathering operation. Every moment his fleet had spent in threatening positions had provided human analysts with crucial data about hegemony capabilities. "You have been studying us," he realized, "even as we threatened your extinction. General, humans have been studying predators for our entire evolutionary history. We learned long ago that the best time to understand how something kills is right before it tries to kill you. These past 3 days have been the most intensive intelligence-gathering operation in human history." The communication system activated with new priority alerts. Subcommander Veltar's voice carried unprecedented urgency. "General, long-range sensors detect massive hyperspace signatures throughout the sector. Multiple fleets are moving toward human territories." Admiral Chen nodded as if she had been expecting this news. "Those would be the other 6 hegemony fleets moving to attack human colonies. We've been tracking them since they left their bases. Each one is moving toward a star system that now contains approximately 3,000 hastily constructed suicide ships and a human population that's had 72 hours to prepare defensive positions." The strategic picture was becoming clear to Thaxakar in ways that made his military training rebel against the implications. The humans hadn't just refused his ultimatum. They had used it as a coordination signal for species-wide resistance. Every hegemony fleet in the sector was now moving toward prepared defensive positions, manned by an enemy that specialized in impossible victories. "You planned this," Thaxakar said, the statement carrying tones of accusation and admiration. "Your entire species coordinated a response to our expansion before we even arrived." "Not planned, General. Prepared. There's a difference. Humans have been preparing for alien invasion since we first looked at the stars and wondered what else might be looking back. We've written books about it, made films about it, and developed contingency plans for it. When you showed up demanding submission, you weren't encountering an unprepared species. You were activating defense protocols we've been refining for over a century." The countdown reached 30 minutes, and automated systems throughout the human fleet began final targeting sequences. Spite ships throughout the system oriented toward their assigned targets. Each hegemony vessel now faced by multiple kamikaze attackers approaching from different vectors. "Admiral Chen," Thaxakar said, his voice carrying a tone his crew had never heard before, uncertainty mixed with something approaching respect. "In 30 minutes, this system will become a battlefield unlike any in galactic history. Neither of our forces will likely survive the encounter. Is there no possibility of resolution that does not end in mutual annihilation?" Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment, her eyes studying displays that showed the positions of both fleets. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of speaking for her entire species. "General, there is one resolution that avoids bloodshed. You withdraw your forces from all human territories immediately. You return to your empire and inform them that humans are not available for conquest. You make it clear that any future attempts to subjugate our species will result in the kind of warfare that your empire has never experienced. And if I do this, your species will cease construction of suicide vessels?" "No, General. We'll keep building them, lots of them. We'll build them until every human settlement has enough firepower to make any invasion attempt prohibitively expensive. We'll keep building them until your empire understands that humans are more trouble than we're worth." Thaxakar performed rapid calculations on his command console. Withdrawing from human space without achieving submission would be unprecedented in hegemony history. It would suggest that the Empire's expansion could be stopped by species willing to choose death over conquest. The political implications within the hegemony would be enormous. "Admiral, what you propose would fundamentally alter the balance of power in this galaxy. If your species demonstrates that resistance can succeed, other subjugated populations might attempt similar defiance." Admiral Chen's smile was brilliant and terrifying. "General Thaxakar, that's exactly what we're hoping for. Humans believe that freedom is contagious. We'd be delighted to start an epidemic." The final countdown reached 10 minutes, and throughout the system, human ships began accelerating toward their targets. The formation was beautiful in its coordination and horrifying in its implications. Hundreds of vessels moving in perfect synchronization toward mutual annihilation. "General?" Admiral Chen's voice cut through the tension of the moment. "You have 10 minutes to make a choice that will define the future of galactic civilization. You can fight a war against a species that considers death preferable to slavery. Or you can withdraw and tell your empire that humans are the one species in the galaxy that's too stubborn to conquer." Thaxcar looked around his bridge at crew members whose scales displayed patterns of fear, confusion, and anticipation. These were veterans of dozens of successful conquests, soldiers who had never questioned the inevitability of hegemony victory. Now they were facing an enemy that had transformed the concept of defeat into a weapon. "Admiral Chen," Thaxcar said finally, "you have taught me that some species cannot be conquered because they refuse to accept the possibility of surrender. The hegemony empire will withdraw from human space. We will inform our leadership that humanity represents a unique strategic challenge that requires reconsideration of our expansion policies." The response from Admiral Chen was immediate and carried the sound of profound relief mixed with unmistakable satisfaction. "General, you've just made the smartest decision in hegemony military history. I suggest you make it very clear to your superiors that humans don't want to fight the galaxy. We just want to be left alone to do impossible things in peace." Throughout the system, human ships began decelerating from their attack runs. The spite ships didn't stand down. They remained ready to resume their attack at a moment's notice. But the immediate threat of mutual annihilation receded as both fleets maintained their positions. "There is one final matter, Admiral," Thaxcar said, as he prepared orders for fleet withdrawal. "The other hegemony forces moving toward human territories will need to be recalled before they engage your prepared defenses." "Already handled, General. We've been broadcasting this conversation to every human settlement in the galaxy. By the time your fleets arrive at their targets, they'll find the local human commanders waiting with recordings of your withdrawal order and offers to discuss terms for peaceful coexistence." General Thaxcar realized that he had just participated in the first negotiated withdrawal in hegemony history. More than that, he had been maneuvered into a position where retreat was not only acceptable, but strategically necessary. The humans had transformed a show of overwhelming force into a demonstration of their own capabilities. As his fleet prepared to leave human space, Thaxcar sent a final message to Admiral Chen. "Your species fights wars unlike any enemy I have encountered. I find myself hoping that our paths do not cross again in military circumstances." Admiral Chen's response carried warmth that seemed genuine despite everything that had transpired. "General, if your empire ever decides it wants to learn about cooperation instead of conquest, humans would be interested in talking. We're much more pleasant as friends than as enemies." The hegemony fleet departed Sol System 6 hours before their original ultimatum would have expired. Throughout human space, the story spread of how humanity had faced down an galactic empire and convinced them to leave by making the cost of conquest higher than any potential benefit. The spite ships remained on patrol around every human settlement, a visible reminder to any future invaders that humanity had industrialized the concept of mutually assured destruction. And in the halls of the hegemony empire, military planners began developing new strategic doctrines based on a fundamental recognition that some species were simply too unreasonable to conquer. Humanity had won their first galactic war not through superior technology or tactical brilliance, but by being so absolutely committed to freedom that they made slavery impossible to impose. It was, many observers noted, a very human way to achieve victory.